At the login screen, you'll enter your username and your password and select Login. Once logged in, it'll tell you the last time you logged in, but it also is going to have a number of options up here for you. To take your online proctored exam, you select My Assessment. Once logged in, you'll notice that there's a pop-up box and it says Update is required. That is if you haven't already downloaded the secure browser Respondus. Sentinel Secure used to be the old software that they used, and they've changed. So this will continue to pop up until there has been sufficient time to ensure that no one else is still attempting to use Sentinel. If you've already done that, just select Not Now, which is what I'm going to do. But if not, please click Install so that you can make sure that you can take your exam. So I'm going to select Not Now. And as you notice up here, it also gives you the ability to do it. Now, for the purposes of this tutorial, I'm using an unproctored exam. Most of you are going to be taking a proctored exam, so this might say something differently. So let's just ignore that for a moment. If you go to take your exam and there isn't a launch button, that means you're not ready to take your exam. The date hasn't arrived or the time hasn't arrived. You will only see the blue launch button when you are actually able to take your exam. So for the purposes of this tutorial, let's select Launch. Once you select Launch, notice that there is Candidate Instructions. This is just to reiterate to you what you're about to take. It'll also tell you how many questions there are, how many hours you have, and it also is going to give you some instructional information. If you need to use the restroom, you may do that, but the timer will continue to advance. Please note, the timer hasn't started. There's nowhere on this screen that you're seeing a timer, so you're not being dinged for any time for reading the instructions. That only happens when you get into the exam. So you want to make sure that you read the instructions so that you know exactly what to expect and exactly what not to do. This is for a tutorial, so it goes into a lot of information, but you want to make sure that you read your instructions, not necessarily this particular fictitious Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs exam. Once you've read everything, select a launch button. And at this page, still the timer is not started already, but it is just reiterating as a means of your agreement that you've actually already agreed to when you submitted your application. You have to select I agree to continue. If you select I do not agree, you will not deploy your examination. So it's important for you to select I agree, understand what you're agreeing to, and select next. This is now in the exam. Notice that the time has started. And this will always remain for every question that you see. This timer will continue to advance. This is actually telling you that we have 6 questions total, and this is the first question. Now, for the purposes of this tutorial, I'm showing you a myriad of examination question types. Yours might have multiple choice questions. You might also have some complex scenario questions. You may have an essay style question, which is where you have to write your answer. So for the purposes of this tutorial, I'm going to show you at least 6 examples of what we're doing. So this is the question. This is a multiple choice question. These are your answers. So we're going to select our answer, and we then can select Next, Review All, which I'll explain in a second, or Submit the exam. Now underneath these questions, and every question that you have, you'll notice that there is an area with a toggle box that says mark this item for later review. This means if you're not sure of your answer, but you want to just continue to take it, if you have time at the end of the exam, you want to come back and review that, you would select this. And so what this does is instead of clicking Next, you can select Review All, and it will give you an assessment summary that you've only answered one question because we just had answer 1. But notice this little asterisks here. That's because you marked it for I want to review this later. So let's just go back to that question and we're going to continue to advance, but that's what that means. The review all is tied to this. So let's click for the next answer. The next question, I'm sorry. In the story of Snow White, the queen was, and then we're going to answer the question. And we're sure of it, so we're not going to mark it for later. You can go back to the first question, or you can just continue to advance. Now this is a memo question. Now, depending on your exam, some of you taking exams will see this. It'll give you the background right in the side. This red line here is what's called our split screen. So you can actually click it and move it back and forth, and I'll demonstrate that in a moment. So that if you had something on this side of the screen that you needed to see more of, you can move this over. Notice how it's giving me more space to read this question. And so then I'm just going to leave that there. So you read the information, you're given your scenario and the assignment, and then you come to the rich text box to start typing your response. Some memos are configured this way. There are some exams that have a memo that will tell you select a memo from the drop box over here. Now, for the purposes of this tutorial, we're giving it actually in the question and using the test aid for a scenario, but the same would happen. Just follow the instructions that you're seeing on this side of the screen. And if it tells you that you must select, then you know that you have to use the test aid on the other side of your screen. So let's just continue with this the way that it's formatted. You're going to read the background, the scenario, the assignment, paying close attention to this area because that is what you're going to be graded on. So then you're going to select here. Notice it says here, don't use your name and add your AACE ID at the first line of your memo. So I'm going to do that. And let's say it also said, it doesn't say it here, but let's just pretend that it says you also may, for those memos that are saying you have to select it from the test aids on the opposite side of the screen, and you need to tell us what memo you selected. So let's just say you had to do that and you then put memo 100 because we'll pretend that's what it is. And then you can start formatting your memo that, the problem, and it was whatever, and my recommendation, and then you can just list whatever. And then you can, maybe you want to save this in case you have time at the end to come back and read what you wrote. You could mark it and then just click next. Now, we have a question here where it's saying the following question requires your selection of SW, Snow White scenario number 1. Well, we've already done that when I demonstrated for the other question. So if we need, we can do this to move it over so that we can see the full, or we can keep it over like that and use these navigational. It really depends. Each scenario is formatted differently, but you have the ability to move it around. You can zoom in and you can zoom out, or you can zoom reset. So it's telling you the following question requires your selection. So we have to refer to this table over here. It asks which dwarf is in charge of hunting on Sundays. So we find Sundays, we find hunting, we know it's Doc. So we select that. That's how you use the test aids. We're going to select next. Then we're going to have another multiple choice question. We're just going to answer that. We're going to answer this. And then we're saying, okay, we answered all questions. Now I want to review. Let's review all. It's giving you a summary that you answered. You provided an answer for every single question that was asked of you because it says number of items unanswered is 0. And then we only marked 2 that we wanted to review. So you can see what your answers were for each question, but we see the 2 asterisks. So let's go back to question 1. And we're pretty sure that it really is 7. So we can take that off. We know, we feel good about that. We can either continue to go through or we can go back to review all to see. For those of you that are taking questions that have over 100 questions, this is probably the best way to do it. And we go back to our next asterisk question, which is the essay. So we come back here, we read our information. Of course, now it's cutting that off because of the formatting there. So we're going to slide that over out of our way and we're going to read. We're going to make sure that we followed all the instructions. We're going to be okay with that. And now we're like, okay, maybe time is ticking down and you only have 1 minute left. You want to submit it. Note that if you run out of time and it's at 0, it will submit the exam automatically for you. But in this case, we still have some time left. So we've reviewed everything, we feel good, and now we're just going to submit the exam. It will always ask you, are you sure you want to continue? Because it's saying you're about to submit this, and after you do that, you can't review or modify. Everything is going to be submitted to AACE International. If you are a little nervous and you want to go back because you have time, you certainly can be right back where you were, review your exam. You could go back to the beginning. You can do anything that you want. Once you're ready, submit the exam, and when you're sure, and unless you run out of time, you can submit your exam. Once you submit your exam, it will tell you how many minutes you've taken out of the total allotted, and it will also tell you, for other than your technician level exams, which will tell you exactly whether you've passed or failed, all other exams, it will tell you that your score for this exam is unavailable because all other exams have a component that needs to be extracted and graded by our volunteer graders. Then you'll just exit the test and you'll come back to the login screen and you'll wait for further instructions from AACE International Certification Headquarters staff.